If a very particular definition of space, space may be conceived according to the editors of key thinkers on space and space as outside of human existence. So, space may be conceived as outside of human existence. Rather than playing an active role in shaping social life, it is regarded as a backdrop against which human behavior is played out. Now, Foucault predicts that the present epoch would perhaps be above all the epoch of space. Foucault also finds that our life is governed by a certain number of oppositions that we regard as simple humans. What are the oppositions? For example, between private space and public space, between family space and social space, between cultural space and useful space, between the space of leisure and that of God. Now, another critic, E21, of whom Sonoda has mentioned, okay, and in his book, Space and Place, E21 has opined that he has actually stressed that space does not have any specific scale associated with it, but is created and maintained through the fields of care that result from people's emotional attachments. Using the concept of topophilia and topophobia to places is what alerted geographers to the sensual, aesthetic, and emotional dimensions of space. Now, the difference and relation between space and place have been evaluated by a number of cultural and political critics. We know the name of Velasco. He opines that space is the creation of colonialism that virtually dislocated the colonizers or the colonized, sorry, I'm repeating, space is the creation of colonialism that virtually dislocated the colonized. This, in contrast, is the pre-colonial perception of belonging in time, community, and landscape. A perception that post-colonial transformation strives to retrieve is in a deglobalized, that is, specialized form of global consciousness. Now, space as a place of socio-political and cultural understanding, as well as encounter, is a significant aspect of negotiation. Actually, space contemplated or reminisced appears to extra a profound influence on his protagonists in majority of his works. Now I am coming to the Hamletite. The Hamletite exposes the ruthless uprooting of people from Bangladesh, their deportation in 1961 to the arid areas of Raniganj, which is now situated in Chhattisgarh, but at that time it was situated in Madhya Pradesh. And we should keep in mind the year of their deportation. The year was 1961. That means at that time Congress government was there. Okay. Now they were being deported to Raniganj. Their rehabilitation in different locations of Burdwan were made by the then left from government in 1979. Okay, but most unfortunately, the then left from government actually made the notorious Morichami massacre, in which most of these refugees were gunned down, shot down, okay, by the well foolish of the then left government. This was very pathetic. Now, my paper is an effort to expose such heinous action of the so-called democratically elected government to eradicate human habitations in the name of protecting the animals and to preserve ecological balance through unmitigated violence. The then government said that to maintain ecological balance and to protect the tigers, rather than the tigers, they should kill people, see their observation and their decision. Now, as we go into the northern, we are moved by the pride and suffering of the refugees from East Bengal, who fled from their place of birth after partition from East Pakistan, and also not only in 1947 Also during 1971 crackdown and formation of Bangladesh. The Great Divide of 1947 wreaked havoc with the Hindus and Sikhs of Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, you know that, and also the Hindus of East Bengal. It was, however, the crackdown of 1971 on the people of East Bengal by the Punjabi-dominated Urdu-speaking Muslims of West Pakistan that sounded the death knell of Hindus of East Bengal. Many of them fled to neighboring India and were treated as refugees. Even after the formation of Bangladesh, many were reluctant to go back and wanted to live in India. These people made the Sundarbans their home and settled there. Life for these settlers is an incessant battle of survival against the unpredictable storms and tides, both natural and man-made. To add to that, the heinous action of the government was there. They were ultimately murdered en masse during the Mooric massacre, the notoriously Mooric massacre. Despite its threatening environment, charged with fears of all the devouring tides and man-eating tigers and crocodiles, it is a deep sense of human bonding among the islanders which transcends differences of class, caste, creed, and nationality that help the inhabitants to defeat the forces bent on destroying them. Now, the two prime locales of the action in Sundarban were Nusibari and Burdwan, and they were fictitious places in Ghosh's fiction, The Archetype. However, Ghosh remarks that the secondary locations such as Kenya, Goshawa, Shabjalia, Morichabi, and Redefining are real places inhabited by refugees from East Bengal and other disposed factions of society. Those travels to this area along with Bhalotia establishing a heteroclastic national identity. And here he does this by using a largely realistic framework around a geographical space, which itself is fantastical, extremely unrealistic, and using the context of history and digressing into it, not borrowed from established regions, but the local folktales that itself were reflective of the cultural heritage of the land. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful lecture. Our next presenter is Vidya, and her title is Water Infringing Human Rights.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to read out the preface of my paper titled Border Infringing Humankind through Amrita Grimham's poem Aaj Ankha Varis Shana, or I speak unto Varis Shah. The planet of partition holocaust has been deciphered and transmitted through literary words by the prolific writers of this subcontinent as they have experienced, witnessed, and endured the sheer trauma of partition, brutalization, and subjugation of humanity. Those artists share the never-ending sense of belongingness to their home, which suddenly belonged to a different nation, different land altogether, as just a border was erected between them. Literatures like Sagat Hassan Manto, Faiz Ahmed Faiz, Sahil Ludhianvi, Kartalain Haidar, Intizar Hussain, Bhishma Sahani, Kushal Singh, Ismat Shukrai, Chaman Nahal, Shiv Kumar had their first-hand experience of partition as they all had to leave their homeland forcefully. So a sense of uprootedness and alienation haunt their words as they often use partition as their leitmotif. Quite similarly, the Margaret, the indefatigable convict of Britain, is another witness of the horror of partition, caused as she had to flee her motherland in one blood-soaked morning of 1947. She was a direct victim of partition and was rendered refugee. She contemplates the horrid memory in her autobiography Revenue Stamp. The riot-torn month of May 1947 took me for safety to Tehran. 1919 born Amrita Pritam left her birthplace Gujranwala, Punjab, which is now in Pakistan just because a mere border cut through a country and left two pieces apart. This is Pritam's birthplace Gujranwala, which is now in Punjab, in Pakistan. Then it was in Punjab, now divided India. The insane madness of partition was so contagious that it blinded the mass and divided them into the name of religious identity. The division made according to the then outgoing colonizers birthed humongous waves of hatred, humiliation, distrust, mass murder, communal riots, atrocities against women. Further, in her autobiography, Amrita Pritam elaborates the heart-shattering account which throughout her life left an indelible imprint on her mind and psyche. I'm reading out from her autobiography now. The most gruesome accounts of marauding invaders in all mythologies and chronicles put together will not, I believe, compare with the blood-curdling horror of this horrific year. Day after day, each more hair-raising than the last, would take a whole lifetime to retain. Uprooted from Lahore, I had rehabilitated myself in Dehradun for a while, but later went to Delhi for work and a place to live in. On my return journey, I could not get a wink of sleep on the train. The pitch black darkness of the night was like a sign of the times. So piercing were the sighs of winds carried and echoed, it seemed we were back in mourning over the watershed of history. The trees looked larger and larger like sentiments of sorrow. There were patches of stark aridity in between like the mounds of massive graves. The words of Waris Shah, how will the dead and departed meet again? Surged back and forth through my mind. I thought a great poet like him alone could bewail the loss of he once had to bear. But who could not think of no one greater than Waris Shah to chant my invocation to? In the moving train, my trembling fingers moved on to describe the pangs I went through. आज आंखा बारिश शायद कि तू कमरा बिछो बोल ते आज किताब इश्क दा कोई अगला वर्ता बोल. Speak from the depths of rain to one shy say, and add a new page of the saga of love today. The train rolled through the dark night as though it was moving through an endless tunnel in the fall of 1947. She poured out her heart, left it bare and open to Waris Shah with a desire to be healed. So, this very poem is a soul-piercing imploration to her muse, Waris Shah, with the hope of his resurrection. But the poem does not limit itself into a mere invocation, as it functions by mimicking the structure and form of Eve by Waris Shah, the famous Eve Ranjha, the romance, the immortal romance, exploiting the narrative technique of the oral tradition. I say unto Waris Shah, powerfully conjures a sense of place by drawing on images of a Punjabi landscape and rural life. This is a famous Punjabi landscape, all colorful, the fields, the river Chenab, the Ara, the the speaking bills and the people tree, Varisha he begins in much the same way, with detailed description of Tak Hazara, the village where Ramcha lived. Hazara is described as a paradise on earth, a bountiful hamlet. This exuberant description is immediately followed by an ironic contrast. As a hyperbolic description of the Hazara, with a stanza exposing the corrosive jealousy of Rancha's brothers comes next. The brothers are compared to venomous snakes, completing the biblical imagery by placing a serpent in paradise. Amrita quite similarly evokes the geography of the land, contemplating her description of the landscape with tropes from the folk traditions such as Rancha's flute and the girl's trinchon. Galeon tute geet film, Takaleon tuti tam, Trinchano tutia saheria, Charakhe Bhutarban, which reads in English like, with stain after stain did the servants suppress the voice of people. A moment so brief, and the lens of Punjab turned blue because it's poisoned. Threads snapped from their shuttles and rent the songs as their throats silenced was the speaking with harm. The herd from their gatherings, the women. Another example is Zarkhe Zameen Pe Noon Noon Futiya Zahar, Git Git Chariya Laliya, Put Put Chariya Keher. Zahar, Keher, they are having a similar meaning, poison. Pritam herself is translating, and heavy with venom were the winds that blew through the forests, transmuting into a snake the reed of each musical branch. So, Amrita Pritam very artistically draws a sheer contrast between the colorful landscape of Punjab and the blood-soaked land that Punjab has become after the partition. The juxtaposition of physical landscape with the hallmarks of Punjab immediately been contrasted to the image of crimson river and poisoned pastures. So you can see the horrors of partition, the mass exodus, the displacement, the trauma. The newspapers becomes the chronicle of nightmare. And Pritam weaves that nightmare through the lines. What continually haunts us after a deep reading of this poem, how Pritam weaves the gruesome reality of partition and the bordered existence of people. Literally speaking, a border means the line or a frontier area separating political or geographical regions. But that would be an oversimplification of the concept of border. Border carries deep psychological, mental, emotional, and even border connotation. It not only separates two countries, it disintegrates neighborhoods, shared ethos, separates culture and history. Apart from the death, destruction, loss of property, displacement, cruelty, loss of trust, border does something much more to our mind and psyche. Pritam also dwells on what it does to friendships. As suddenly, people find themselves on two sides of the rat-tailed line, drawn so carelessly by the British officers who had no idea of the wounds that they were inflicting on people of both sides. Moreover, in case of Indian subcontinent, it stands as a curse, a stigma, a mark of shame and a seal of sorrow to borrow Beach's words. Pritam was a foresight who would appropriately guess the infringement caused by border existence of both the divides group, and it will only magnify. Even before the pain of partition, Pritam had been weighed down by some sense of premonition, perhaps when she wrote, "Fellow traveler, we are parting company today. The distance between us with growth. So after 78 years, it has still been necessary to invoke a message of peace and love that Prism's views Vanisha and Prism herself with others wanted to inculcate in those conflict times. Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam. Our next presenter is Siddhartha Sen, and he is titled as his paper is titled as Greece Historically Changing Borders. We'll take up the questions at the end of the session. If there are any questions or any suggestions on the part of the participants, and if anybody else has to say something. As of now, I hand over the mic to Mr. Sen.
Good afternoon, everybody. I must thank and express my gratitude to our Vidya Charcha Kendra and PPP College, as well as the dignitaries, the arrangement committee, and the secretary. Especially Professor Roy and Professor Bhattacharya, whom I know and to whom I have come here and we have done this. Okay. The presentation is on Greek historically changing borders and its implications. Since the entire subject deals with the border lines, I thought Greece will be an extremely good example of putting how borders, political borders, are drawn, redrawn, cancelled, and again redrawn, ultimately leading to a very tragic condition of Greece, particularly, where the country got its independence in 1832 with 50% of its land mass, which it used to inhabit 2 million years back. That is for 3,000 years, the land which we got half of it, and they came into being as a modern place. So that becomes an extremely interesting example and case study for particularly for the history students. Well, methodological analysis is very straightforward. I have looked into the historically Greek settlements and then tried to find out what are the genetic components of the inhabitants 3,000 years back and till date, just to adjust and conclude that the same people are continuing till date. Of course, with a bit of change in the genetic structure because of new people coming in, because of neon and outward migration. And I must say very clearly that this study do not include the regions where Greek Empire was built. We all know that Alexander built one of the largest empires spanning across 3 continents, Europe, Africa, and Asia. And that was the world's largest empire at that point of time. But that was empire. We are not discussing empire building. We are trying to discuss how Greece as a community and Greece as a nation has lost its border because of the redrawing of border. And also, I have kept the colonies of Greece out of this study. Magna Graecia is a very interesting topic, wherein it is shown that from 1100 BC to about 1500 years, Greece created one of the largest diaspora community to about 3,000 years back in southern Italy and Sicily. So that is also out of this scope. So let us see what are the scope of areas which is included in this study. As we can see, one, it is nothing but the southernmost tip of the Balkan Peninsula, which is Greek mainland. Number 2 is the southern part of the Balkan, which is north to the southernmost part, and again it is the Balkan homeland of Greece. Number 3 is Aegean Sea Islands. Number 4 is Crete. Number 5 is Cyprus. Number 6 is West Anatolia. So these 6 regions are the Greek inhabited regions since historical times and prehistory. We'll see how it is played out there. I will not get into the analysis too detailed because these are all texts which will take a lot of time. We have a short time. So everybody must excuse me for if I take 2 minutes more. But we have to note the very important aspect of how the timelines are defined. 6,500 years, 6,500 to 3,200 BC is mostly the Neolithic and Chalcolithic period. Before the Gold Age sets in, 3,200 to 1,100 BC is the time when we call as Bronze Age. Then 1100 to 146 BC in Greece, it is called Dark Age first, then Archaic Age, then Classical Age, and then Hellenistic Age. I mean, starting with the complete depopulation at around 1100 BC, with the Sea People's invasion up to death of Alexander and complete acquisition of the Greek Empire by Roman Empire happening in 146 BC, except Anatolia, which went on another 6-7 years more. Anyway, 146 BC to 1204 again is the watershed period for Greece history. It is the period of Roman Empire, which started as Roman Empire, which is nothing but in history we call as Western Roman Empire. And when in between Emperor Diocletian decided to break completely west from east around 390, the eastern part, that is the Greek part, separated out as Eastern Roman Empire, and which we know in history as Byzantine Empire. And up to 1204, the Byzantine Empire ruled over the Greek areas. And 1204, it was the time which is probably one of the least reported and least understood subject in history. That is, fourth crusade broke up the Byzantine Empire and they invaded and actually acquired it, occupied it. So from 1204 to 1821, first the Latin Empire, that is the Crusaders, Venetian Republic, and then slowly they got dispossessed by the incoming Ottoman Turk, and who ruled up to 1821. In between, of course, the Greeks fought time and again as revolution to get independence, but then it all went up to time exercise. And 1821 to 2000 is the modern Greece, where, as I said from the outset, that Greece's territory got half. We'll come to that. So I'm just scrolling down this. The first slide is for region 1 and 2, that is Balkan Greece 1 and 2. 3, 4 is Aegean Islands and Crete, that part. The small differences are there because you have difference of population, difference of community from the beginning. If we look Crete, that is called as the first educated and literate civilization of Europe, because Minoans, as we call it, Minoans brought this Cretan language first in Europe. That is around 2200 BCE, so 4200 years back. Then Aegean civilization is called as Cycladic culture. And when you move into the Balkan Peninsula Greece, it is initially they used to call as just Greek civilization, then it is termed as Mycenaean civilization. So Minoan versus Mycenaean became a big topic for the 1000 years from 2000 to 1000 BC in Greece. And finally, the Mycenaeans actually ruled over entire Greece. And 5 and 6 is Cyprus and West Anatolian mainland, both are Greek mainland again. So, having said this, we have to understand that all these peoples in these 6 areas are not the same. By saying same means I am saying that entire genetic mapping is in total 100% mapping. No, it is never done in any territory, even in one jilla. একটা জেলাতেও কখনো জেলার মধ্যে সব মানুষের genetic mapping সেম হবে না. So in Greece, what we found, these are all internationally published in Science and Nature magazine. And very latest, I think 2022. They say that all the Greek communities have Anatolian Neolithic farmer as the principal component of that genome. Very interesting, because in history it is always told that Indo-Europeans went to Greece and settled and blah blah, but it is not so. It is Anatolian Neolithic farmers having the largest component, then CAG, that is Caucasus hunter-gatherers having a minority component, then EAG, that is East European hunter-gatherers having another small component, and finally Levant, that is now what is Lebanon, Syria, Israel, that Levant area, which is pre-modern Neolithic, that has a very minor component. So these components among themselves change a bit here and there and make up entire Greek communities for those 6 areas. And even with this, we can understand one thing, is how it compares with the present day Greeks. So that findings are, say, of 2000 years back, 2500, 3000 years back. What is the status today? So this one shows the affinity or non-affinity. So if the record, if the color stays near red or a bit reddish, that means this is the Greek area. This exactly shows red. This is red. This is red but a bit light. This is a bit light, but still these are red. So Out of 3,000 years genetic composition, inward migration and outward migration changed very little of the Greek population. And most interestingly, there is no direct invasion by any Indo-European for that matter. And more interestingly, Indo-Europeans get their genetic composition from two components mainly. One is the East European hunter-gatherers, second one is Caucasian hunter-gatherers. So, one way it can be seen that the Greek population is parallel to the Indo-Europeans development of that. Maybe a bit of different time levels. But these are almost same as that of Mycelians, Minoans of Lassithi, Minoans of Heraclean, as well as Anatolia, West Anatolia. So what are the main findings we find here? Main findings from history are the period 2000 BCE to 146 BCE plus 394 CE current era, when Eastern Roman Empire became Byzantine Empire, which was nothing but the Greek part of the empire, up to 404 when the fourth crusade broke up Byzantine. Greek, Proto-Greek and Greek communities achieved a towering height of intellectual and socio-cultural geopolitical feats. I think even till date, Socrates, Plato, or Archimedes, they are unparalleled, even now, across the globe. So, this is very clear finding. Second is, since the late medieval period, Greeks completely lost one of these 6 regions. They completely lost is southeastern part of Anatolian Peninsula. It has been completely lost to Turks. Then next one is another region, Cyprus, is of course not lost to Ottomans, but they remain independent with Ottomans, like Turkey, occupying 1/3 of the island even now till date. And remaining 4 regions, which combined to form the modern Greek between 1830 up to 1947, when UK and Italy finally handed over some part of the Aegean Sea islands to Greek government. So about 117 years of struggle to piece together these 4 parts and becoming of Greece, modern Greece. And the area of it is 132,000 square kilometers. We will remember this and we will compare this at the end. And another main finding was, when the southwestern Anatolia was lost permanently to Turkey, there was a huge genocide and discrimination against the Greeks. They were killed in lakhs, and remaining destitute Greeks were packaged and sold, sent back to Greek mainland. So, what are the main reasons for capitulation? See, Greek developed so much. They were intellectually far superior to any other community in the world. But they were militarily so powerful. But why it capitulated time and again in history? This study shows that there are just 2 things which they disturbed all through their civilization. Mistrust, jealousy, disunity, and competition played havoc in 2 layers. One is different tribes and different communities. Communities played out, and second is 2 types of peoples, like the Romans and the Venetians were very ferocious and challenging, so they lost out in this. So finally, I will just conclude it. There are a set of hypotheses it can be seen that if the peoples cannot maintain their self-sufficiency in socio-cultural and economic efforts, they are bound to lose and become insignificant. If the people do not continue dissemination of knowledge, they are bound to get materially down. If the people do not maintain their population steadily over a period of centuries, they are going to get down as a nation, no doubt about it. And finally, if any nation has such communities, the nation is going to get down in the global scenario. And last, I will just share with you one data. See, modern Greece, I stole 132,000 square kilometers, and this western Anatolia, which was permanently lost to Turkey, is 137,000 square kilometers. So, about 50% of Greece was lost permanently. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, sir. All the presenters are requested to mention the time, please. 7 minutes is your allotted time. Our next presenter is Professor Shamba Monu. She will be presenting online.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are on.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, respected chairperson, my fellow presenters. Today, I'd like to present a paper on how childhood is jeopardized and prematurely cut off due to socio-political failure, migration, and displacement in a divided world through a gendered lens. The title of my paper is Silence and Survival: Gendered Responses to Childhood Trauma in No Violet Ways. We Need New Names. We Need New Names offers a powerful narrative that captures the turbulent experiences of a young girl named Darling, who navigates a complex web of poverty, migration, and trauma. Set against the backdrop of Zimbabwe's socio-political decay and the disorienting promise of the American dream, the novel examines the impact of trauma on children. While both boys and girls are affected by the systematic violence, displacement, and instability that characterizes their world, it is the female characters whose trauma is most deeply internalized and whose responses are shaped by silence and emotional endurance. This paper explores silence not as a form of suppression or a passive absence, but as a gendered strategic form of survival, shaped by patriarchal norms and cultural expectations. Here, silence is seen as a gendered coping mechanism. The children we see here live in a world of stark contradictions. They are simultaneously victims and witnesses to both personal and political trauma. Among the most harrowing stories is that of Chipo, a young girl who is pregnant after being raped by her grandfather. While her friends, Darling, Bustard, and others, are aware of her condition, they treat it with an unsettling sense of normalcy. Their response is not apathy, but a form of emotional detachment. It is learned silence born of a society that does not encourage the articulation of female trauma. As Chikiti notes, I quote, silence becomes a cultural necessity, an enforced etiquette that guards against social shame, unquote. In this light, Chipo's silence is not just a personal choice, but a social imposition that reflects the normalization of gendered violence in her community. Darling embodies a narrative style that is often understated, especially in recounting moments of violence or emotional distress. Her voice, while sharp and observant, often avoids direct emotional engagement with trauma. This stylistic choice reflects a psychological distancing, a technique of self preservation in a chaotic world. The novel also depicts survival through adaptation and emotional labor. The second half of the novel, which follows Darling's migration to the United States, shifts focus to cultural dislocation and the quiet trauma of alienation. In America, she becomes invisible in a society that flattens African identities and expects assimilation without understanding. Her silence here takes on a new dimension. It is not only a continuation of her coping strategy, but also a response to racial and cultural marginalization. The author portrays the fragmented self of the immigrant child who must navigate multiple identities while carrying unspoken trauma. In her new environment, Darling must censor her language, suppress her action, and avoid mentioning Zimbabwe unless it is to satisfy exotic curiosity. Her silence is now shaped not just by gender, but by race and displacement. The emotional labor she performs to appear normal, to not disrupt the American narrative of success and opportunity, becomes a central part of her survival. The burden of this emotional labor is gendered. Unlike the boys who may act out or reject cultural norms, the girls in We Need New Names are expected to internalize their trauma and adapt. They become caregivers, peacekeepers, and translators of their cultural pain. Darling, for example, is constantly expected to represent her country in conversation with Americans, turning her identity into a performance that further silences her real experiences. I would now like to highlight gendered expectation and the burden of maturity. Portrayal of childhood in this novel, particularly for girls, is deeply intertwined with premature responsibility. Chipo's pregnancy is emblematic of the ways in which young girls are forced to grow up quickly in patriarchal societies. Her body becomes a site of violence and shame, and yet she is expected to carry on with life as if nothing has changed. There is no intervention, no justice, only the expectation of endurance. Darling and her female friends are similarly pushed into maturity by the circumstances of their lives. Their conversations, though veiled with humor and childish games, are often disturbingly mature in content. They discuss politics, death, sex, and survival with a fluency that belies their age. In conclusion, this study is an attempt to understand how gender shapes responses to trauma. The silence is not passive but deeply strategic, an adaptation to the cultural, social, and political forces that shape these girls' lives. In portraying silence as a gendered, emotional, and political response to trauma, the novel challenges readers to rethink conventional narratives of victimhood and resilience. The novel insists that survival is not always loud and resistance is not always visible, but both are no less powerful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next presenter is Dr. Shabina Das.
Hello, may I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Please carry.
Hello?
Hello. Yes, you are audible.
হ্যাঁ, ওকে।
Okay, please carry.
নমস্কার। আমার পেপারটা হচ্ছে নারী প্রতিবাদী ও প্রতিরোধ আন্দোলনে গোলাপী গ্যাং। নাগরিক নিরাপত্তা হলো অপরাধ ও সহিংসতা থেকে সুরক্ষিত করার ধারণা। সেটি হতে পারে একটি রাষ্ট্রের বাহ্যিক বা আভ্যন্তরীণ শক্তি থেকে সুরক্ষা দান। বেশিরভাগ তাত্ত্বিক একমত হবেন যে একটি শক্তিশালী রাষ্ট্র তার নাগরিকদের নিরাপত্তা প্রদানে সর্বোত্তম ভূমিকা নিতে পারে। তবে এখানে বিতর্ক তৈরি হয় যে একটি দুর্বল রাষ্ট্র নাকি বেসরকারি সংস্থাগুলো জনসাধারণের নিরাপত্তা দানের জন্য কার্যকরী উপযোগী হবে। এই বিতর্কে লিঙ্গ ও প্রান্তিকীকরণের ভূমিকা ঘিরে আলোচনার মধ্যে এই প্রবন্ধে স্থান পেয়েছে গুলাবী গাঙের মতো একটি নারীবাদী সংগঠন, যারা রাষ্ট্র নারী সুরক্ষা দিতে ব্যর্থ হলে তাদের নিজস্ব নিরাপত্তা প্রদান করবে এবং এই নিরাপত্তা রাষ্ট্রীয় নিরাপত্তার চেয়ে ভালো হবে। পিতৃতান্ত্রিক সমাজ ব্যবস্থায় ভারতীয় নারীরা কতটা সুনিশ্চিত নিরাপত্তা লাভ করে সেই বিষয় পরিপ্রেক্ষিতে এই গোলাপী গ্যাংয়ের কার্যকরণ গুরুত্ব পেয়েছেন। তাদের কার্যকলাপের মধ্যে একটি শৈল্পিক ভাবনার প্রকাশ ও কার্যকর করে তাকে সুদূর প্রসারী করে তুলতে সামাজিক ব্যাধিগুলোকে নির্মূল করার যে প্রচেষ্টা, তার গ্রামীণ সমাজে অসহায় নারীদের দুর্নীতিবাজ প্রশাসনিক কর্মী, গার্হস্থ্য হিংসা উত্তপ্ত করা, ধর্ষকদের বিরুদ্ধে প্রতিরোধ গড়ে তোলার ক্ষেত্রে নারীদের জাগরণীকে প্রস্ফুটিত করে। উত্তরপ্রদেশের প্রত্যন্ত এক গ্রামে একজন নারী একক প্রচেষ্টা কিভাবে পিতৃতন্ত্রের বিরুদ্ধে নারী ক্ষমতায়নের পক্ষে ন্যায় বিচার প্রতিষ্ঠায় এগিয়ে এসে অন্য নারীদের প্রতিবাদ মুখী করে তুলেছে এবং গোলাপী গ্যাংয়ের মতো একটি সংগঠন প্রতিষ্ঠা করে তা শুধুমাত্র ভারতেই নয়, বিশ্বের কাছে তার কার্যপ্রণালীকে সকল নারী ও বিদ্বজ্জনদের কাছে খ্যাতির আসনে প্রতিষ্ঠা করেছে, তাই আমার প্রবন্ধে উল্লেখিত করেছি। গোলাপী গ্যাংয়ের শৈল্পিক কার্যকলাপ নারীর শিক্ষা, সচেতনা ও নিরাপত্তা দানের প্রচেষ্টা অন্যান্য সংগঠন ও নাগরিক সমাজকে উদ্বুদ্ধ করেছিল পিতৃতান্ত্রিক সমাজে নারীর ক্ষমতায়ন ঘটিয়ে সামাজিক লিঙ্গগত বৈষম্যের উৎপাদন করে লিঙ্গ সমতা ভিত্তিক সমাজ প্রতিষ্ঠায় এগিয়ে আসতে। নারী আন্দোলনের সক্রিয়তা প্রয়াসই নারীবাদী সাহিত্য সমসাময়িক নারীবাদী বিতর্কের মধ্যে একটি বিশেষ স্থান অধিকার করে আছে। নারীবাদী ইতিহাস আন্দোলন, মিছিল, প্রচার, সক্রিয় প্রতিরোধ, একাধিক রূপে সংগ্রাম উত্থান প্রত্যক্ষ করেছে, যা নারীদের আত্মমর্যাদা, অধিকার, দাবি আদায়ের সংগ্রাম বলে বিবেচিত হয়েছে। দারিদ্র সমাজে বসবাসকারী মহিলারা প্রায়শই সহিংস ও সামাজিক গ্রহণযোগ্যতার ঝুঁকির সম্মুখীন হয়ে থাকে। ভারতে নারীবাদী একটি দলের নেতৃত্বে 2006 খ্রিস্টাব্দে আবির্ভূত হয়েছিল প্রতিরোধ আন্দোলন ও সাম্প্রতিক বছরগুলোতে এখনো সক্রিয় রয়েছে এই প্রতিষ্ঠানটি। ভারতীয় প্রেক্ষাপটে এটি অত্যন্ত তাৎপর্যপূর্ণ হয়ে রয়েছে, কারণ একটি গ্রামীণ ভারতীয় পুরুষতন্ত্রের মধ্যে তৃণমূল স্তরে উদ্বুদ্ধ হয়েছিল। এই নারীদের ন্যায় বিচার প্রদানে একজন দৃঢ় ইচ্ছাশক্তি সম্পন্ন মহিলার উদ্যোগে শুরু হয়, যিনি তার বিবাহের প্রাথমিক বছরগুলোতে যৌন হয়রানি, পারিবারিক সহিংসতা থেকে বেঁচে গিয়েছিলেন। ইস্পাতের মতো দৃঢ় মহিমা সম্পন্ন সম্পদ পাল দেবী 1 দশক আগে এই আন্দোলন শুরু করেছিলেন এবং এটি এখন একটি পূর্ণাঙ্গ সংগঠনে রূপান্তরিত হয়েছে, যা গ্রামীণ মহিলাদের ক্ষমতায়নের চেষ্টা করে চলেছে। নাগরিক নিরাপত্তা বা নাগরিক সুরক্ষা নিরাপত্তা প্রদান রাষ্ট্রের অপরিহার্য কাজ। ওয়েবারের মতো একটি শক্তিশালী রাষ্ট্র হলো এমন একটি রাষ্ট্র যা রাষ্ট্রের মধ্যে সহিংসতা নিয়ন্ত্রণ করে, নাগরিকদের সহিংস অপরাধ ও যুদ্ধের মতো অন্যান্য অপব্যবহার থেকে রক্ষা করে। ব্যারি পোসন একটি দুর্বল রাষ্ট্রের বিপদগুলি অনুসন্ধান করে যুক্তি দেন যে রাষ্ট্র সঠিক নিরাপত্তা প্রদানকারী, এটি ছাড়া ব্যক্তিরা ক্রমাগত নিরাপত্তাহীনতার মধ্যে বাস করবে। তিনি পরামর্শ দেন যে একটি রাষ্ট্র পতনের ফলে নাগরিকরা সমস্ত নিরাপত্তা হারাবে, গোষ্ঠীগুলি নিরাপত্তার জন্য দ্বিধাগ্রস্ত হবে, যেখানে তারা অন্যান্য গোষ্ঠীর সম্ভাব্য আগ্রাসনের ভয় গোষ্ঠীগুলো নিজেদের মধ্যে যুদ্ধে লিপ্ত হওয়ার সম্ভাবনা থাকবে। ব্রায়ান টার্নার সলোমন সামাজিক সুবিধার গুরুত্ব ব্যাখ্যা করে বলেছেন, রাষ্ট্রগুলোকে অবশ্যই নিরাপত্তা প্রদান করতে হবে যাতে একটি কার্যকরী নির্ভরযোগ্য রাষ্ট্র হিসেবে দেখা যায় এবং জনগণ দ্বারা স্বীকৃত লাভ করতে পারে। সামাজিক ক্ষেত্রে ন্যায় বিচারের বাস্তবায়ন ঘটানোর ক্ষেত্রে রোজমেরি বুইকেমা, ভিভিয়ান সালভে, হান্না ও জুলিয়া ক্রিস্টোফারের রচনার উপর ভিত্তি করে এই প্রবন্ধে সামাজিক ন্যায় বিচার অর্জনের প্রক্রিয়ার কৌশলগত ধারণা স্থাপনের চেষ্টা করা হলো। এর লক্ষ্য ভারতীয় প্রেক্ষাপটে নারীবাদী বিপর্যয়ের মধ্যে দক্ষতার অর্থ পুনঃকেন্দ্রিক করা, যার ফলে রাষ্ট্র ব্যর্থতাকে সামাজিক সংগঠনের সদস্যদের দৈনন্দিন জীবনে নৈপুণ্যতা অর্জন করার একটা অভিনব দৃষ্টিভঙ্গি প্রদান করতে পারে। অন্যান্য অনেক তাত্ত্বিকরা মনে করেন যে নারীবাদী সংগঠনগুলো নির্যাতিত নারীদের কেবলমাত্র রক্ষা করে না, বরং নারীদের রাজনৈতিক ক্ষমতা অর্জনের সহায়তা করতে পারে এবং তাদের যথাযথ প্রয়োগ ঘটায় নারী ক্ষমতায়নের মাধ্যমে। ভারতের উত্তরপ্রদেশে গোলাপী গ্যাংয়ের ধারণাটি দেখা যায় কিভাবে নারীদের নিরাপত্তা দানকারী গোষ্ঠীগুলো রাষ্ট্রের চেয়ে ভালো নিরাপত্তা প্রদান করতে পারেছে। ভারতে পিতৃতান্ত্রিক সমাজ ব্যবস্থার নারী দ্বিতীয় শ্রেণীর নাগরিক হিসেবে বিবেচিত হয়। তারা পুরুষতান্ত্রিক সমাজে প্রতিনিয়তই নানা প্রকার প্রতিবন্ধকতার সম্মুখীন হয়। সুশান শর্মা দেখিয়েছেন যে ভারতেও নারীদের ক্ষমতায়ন ঘটলে পুরুষেরা হীনমন্যতায় ভুগতে থাকেন এবং সহিংস রূপ ধারণ করে প্রতিশোধ নেয়। তিনি আরো দেখিয়েছেন নারীরা যখন কিছু আর্থিক লাভ করে তখন তারা চরম সহিংসতার মুখোমুখি হতে হয়। 1990 এর দশকের শেষের দিক থেকে ধর্ষণের ঘটনা 240% বৃদ্ধি পেয়েছে। সম্পদ পাল দেবীর নেতৃত্বে সংগঠিত গোলাপী গ্যাং ও তার দল বেশ কয়েকটি প্রকল্পে জড়িয়েছিল। তাদের অন্যতম প্রধান লক্ষ্য ছিল ভারতের অনুন্নত রাজ্যগুলির গ্রামীণ মহিলাদের স্বনির্ভরশীল করে তোলা। এই দলটি সক্রিয়ভাবে এমন উদ্যোগগুলোকে সমর্থন করে ও মহিলাদের সচেতন করে প্রতিরোধমূলক মানসিক দৃঢ়ভাবে গড়ে তোলে। পরবর্তীতে পারিবারিক আয় অবদান রাখে। নারীদের শিক্ষাদানের মাধ্যমে স্বনির্ভর করে গড়ে তোলার জন্য বিভিন্ন হস্তশিল্প জাতিগত পণ্যের পাশাপাশি মহিলাদের গৃহস্থালী শিল্পের প্রশিক্ষণের উপর জোর দেন। বিভিন্ন গৃহস্থালীর জিনিসপত্র যেমন মাদুর, কার্পেট, কাপড়, গালিচা বিভিন্ন বজ্র পদার্থ থেকে তৈরি করার প্রশিক্ষণ এখানে দেওয়া হয়। উত্তরপ্রদেশের মহিলারা স্পষ্টত নারীদের সহিংসতা থেকে রক্ষা করার জন্য ন্যায় বিচার প্রদানের উদাহরণ স্থাপন করেন, কারণ রাজ্য তাদের নিরাপত্তা দিতে অক্ষম। সম্পদ পাল দেবী 2006 খ্রিস্টাব্দে মহিলাদের ন্যায় বিচার ও সুরক্ষা প্রদানের জন্য গোলাপি শাড়ি গ্যাং তৈরি করেন। তার মতে গোলাপি হলো নারীত্বের মূল উপাদান, যা সুখের প্রতীক, এটি নারীত্বের এবং শক্তি ঐতিহ্যের প্রতীক। তিনি মূলত দরিদ্র মহিলাদের নিয়ে গঠিত সংগঠনের নেতৃত্ব দেন, যাদের অনেকেই এই পর্যায়ে লিঙ্গগত সহিংসতার শিকার হয়েছেন অথবা গ্যাং দ্বারা সাহায্য পেয়েছেন। এই মহিলাদের অনেকে ভারতে নিম্ন শ্রেণী থেকে এসেছেন। তাদের লিঙ্গের মধ্যে নিপীড়নের মুখোমুখি হওয়ার পাশাপাশি তাদের দারিদ্রতা থেকে উদ্বুদ্ধ সমস্যার মুখোমুখি হতে চান। সম্পদ পাল দেবী ব্যক্তিগত জীবনে শিক্ষার আলো পাননি। তিনি স্কুল ও শিক্ষার প্রতি গভীর আগ্রহ প্রকাশ করেছিলেন। তিনি পারিবারিক কাজকর্মে ছেড়ে তিনি স্থানীয় গ্রামের ছেলেদের স্কুলে যাওয়ার পথে বসে কিংবা দূর থেকে পাঠ অনুসরণ করেছিলেন। পরে তিনি বর্ণমালা ও সংখ্যা শেখেন। শিক্ষার প্রতি তার এই আগ্রহ দেখে তার কাকা তাকে বিদ্যালয়ে ভর্তি করান এবং তিনি পড়াশোনায় যথেষ্ট মেধার পরিচয় দেন এবং তিনি মেয়েদের নারী শিক্ষার যথেষ্ট বিশ্বাসী ছিলেন। তিনি যে অঞ্চলে বসবাস করতেন সেখানে বর্ণ শ্রেণী বৈষম্য বেশ প্রাধান্য পেয়েছে। গুলাবিকের অন্য একজন সদস্য চন্দা দেবী বলেন, দলিত হওয়া কেবলমাত্র অভিশাপ নয়, বরং নারী হওয়া ততটা কঠিন। নিম্নবর্ণের গোষ্ঠীগুলোকে সাধারণত দলিত বা অস্পৃশ্য বলা হয় এবং তার ব্যাপক বৈষম্যের সম্মুখীন হয়। বিশেষ করে গ্রামীণ ভারতে বর্তমানে গোলাপী সংগঠন ভারতের বিভিন্ন অঞ্চলে ছড়িয়ে রয়েছে, তেমনি তার সদস্য সংখ্যা 20,000-এর বেশি হয়েছে। এই নারী অধিকার, বাল্যবিবাহ, যৌতুকজনিত মৃত্যু, যৌন সহিংসতার সাথে সম্পর্কিত বিভিন্ন বিষয়ে প্রতিরোধ ও তাদের বিরুদ্ধে প্রতিবাদ গড়ে তুলেছে। গুলাবি গ্যাংয়ের লড়াই কেবলমাত্র পুলিশ বাহিনীর বিরুদ্ধে নয়, রক্ষণশীল ও রাজনীতিকদের দুর্নীতির বিরুদ্ধে বিরুদ্ধে অংশগ্রহণ করে চলেছেন। নারীদের অনুশীলন ভারত জুড়ে অনেকের জীবন উন্নত করেছে। তারা নারীদের ক্ষমতায়ন করেছে, পারিবারিক নির্যাতনের বিরুদ্ধে লড়াই করতে শিখিয়েছে, আত্মরক্ষার প্রশিক্ষণ দিতে শিখিয়েছে। শোষণমূলক আচরণের বিরুদ্ধে জড়িয়ে থাকার সম্ভাবনা থেকে গ্রামীণ ভারতে পারিবারিক নির্যাতনের বিরুদ্ধে আরো বেশি হয়েছে। আমি এখানে সমাপ্ত করতে চাই এইভাবে, যদিও বিদ্বজ্জনেরা নারী সুরক্ষার বিষয়টিকে লিঙ্গগত বৈষম্যের দৃষ্টিতে না দেখে মানবিক দৃষ্টিভঙ্গিতে মানুষ হিসেবে উপলব্ধি করতে পারে, তবে সমাজ উপকৃত হবে। মহিলার প্রাপ্য সুরক্ষা
All the presenters are requested to please follow the time. Dr. Das, please continue.
Hello?
Can you hear me now?
हाँ, yes. हाँ 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 बोलो। হ্যাঁ, কনক্লুশনে আমি আসছি। কনক্লুশনে হচ্ছে যে বিদ্বজ্জনের নারী সুরক্ষার বিষয়টি লিঙ্গগত বৈষম্যের দৃষ্টিতে না দেখে মানবিক দৃষ্টিভঙ্গিতে মানুষ হিসেবে উপলব্ধি করতে পারে, তবে সমাজে উপকৃত হবে ও মহিলাদের প্রাপ্য সুরক্ষা ও ন্যায় বিচার প্রদানের জন্য রাষ্ট্র উদ্যোগী হলে গুলাবি গ্যাংয়ের মতো নারীবাদী সংগঠন কাজকে আরো সহজ করে দেবে, পারিবারিক সহিংসতা এবং পারিবারিক হিংসা দূর হবে। ধন্যবাদ।
Thank you so much. Our next presenter is Kasturi Mukherjee.
Hello, am I audible?
Am I audible?
Hello.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We have 7 minutes.
Yes, I know. I'll keep to the time as much as I can, all right? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me over and for organizing this wonderful seminar. I'll quickly present my screen and then begin. Yeah, I hope you can see my screen on your displays. The title of my paper is Archival Afterlife, the Colonial Entanglements of Emily Dickinson's Herbaria. And what I'm trying to do, what the objective of this paper is, it is to understand how Dickinson's herbaria are mired in colonial entanglements and to understand, to address how one might read the archival afterlife of the plant specimens in her herbaria, some of which reached her across borders from their native biomes, and all of this in the context of plant migration, plant materiality, and critical plant studies focusing on botanical trans-border drift via trajectories of imperialism that placed Dickinson amidst botany's stark colonial and racial logics. Machelli di Paula declares that we are very interestingly now at a juncture he calls the vegetal turn, when, quote, real life issues calling for a far more articulated theory and practice of the vegetal are many and important, and the need for more nuanced and societal debates on vegetal matters is pressing on many fronts. And this becomes a reckoning when we read Banu Subramanian's writing. He writes, in the early modern period, botany was big science and big business, vital to Europe's ambition as a colonial trader. Colonialism ushered a massive and grand reshuffling of global biota, Columbus's biological bedlam. Dickinson, Emily Dickinson, apart from being a poet, was also an avid gardener and a herbarium keeper. In winter, to keep her plants warm, she had a conservatory built in the garden against the southeastern wall of her house. This allowed her to cultivate tropical plants that would not survive New England climate. As Mary Kuhn observes, Dickinson had skill in growing plants that were not native to the area or suited to the climate. In the context of Subramanian's works, Dickinson's expertise is not unique at all, but a rendering of a global fascination that was very much a part of her cultural moment. Dickinson talks of roses from Zanzibar and purple nasturtiums from Peru, among many others, in her poetry. This proves that she was keenly aware that flowers simultaneously comprised the local garden and circumnavigated the globe, making uneasy the explanatory of conceptual categories like local and national. Seed and plant catalogs facilitated this connection. Nurseries on both sides of the Atlantic advertised novel plant variety for the home garden and frequently identified in their catalogs the source of the new variety. Judith Parr points out that the nursery catalogs at the Dickinson homestead included those by B.K. Bliss, whose 1870 spring catalog assigns each variety of plant and seed and flower a native country, and the list includes France, Mexico, California, East Indies, Russia, Chile, New South Wales, among many others, from where seeds were imported. Nursery culture by mid-19th century was tied into global networks of bioprospecting, and customers came to expect the annual arrival of new varieties. Capitalist logic fueled a global flora, and we will see Dickinson's herbarium has proof of that. On page 7 of Dickinson's herbarium, on the right-hand corner, as you see on your screen, is placed Impatiens balsamina, or balsam, a plant that is known to be native to India and Myanmar, and one that in Bangla you and I called dopati. It was a common garden plant in 18th century America and was a part of George Washington's Mount Vernon garden, where he planted it in front of the flower border, as Peter J. Hatch mentions. He also points out that in 1793, a certain Mr. Minton Collins of Alexandria advertised balsam seeds for sale, which he had received in a shipment from London, where in all probability it was brought from the Asian colonies. There is another interesting piece of classical history regarding balsam brought forth by Lawrence Tottelin, who points out that Pliny the Elder, in his 12th book of natural history, reports how dopati was first seen in Rome when it was led to triumph of Vespasian and Titus over the Jews sometime in 71 AD. To quote Pliny the Elder, the emperors Vespasian and Titus exhibited this variety of tree to Rome, and it is a remarkable fact that since the time of Pompey the Great, we have led even trees in triumph. This tree is now a slave. It pays tribute together with its race. So what Pliny does is he presents trees as political bodies with national identities and examines their interactions with another type of political bodies, rulers and their nations. However, the first pressed plant specimen in Dickinson's herbarium is jasmine, Juni, again an Asian native, which over the years has been naturalized in America. This reminded me of Rabindranath Tagore's apparently quiet and shy poem called Phuler Itihash, or The History of Flower, which traces from birth to death the life of a maloti fool, which is a jasmine-like flower. If you choose to read the poem materially, the poem shows us a flower as an actant, an active agent. And I am bound to think that what we are doing here is specifically studying the history of flowers, plants, and my choice of plant material comes from the archival herbarium of Emily Dickinson, and the plant material is replete with things to tell even in their afterlives. For Foucault, botany, including herbaria, was the paradigmatic science of the early modern truth-to-nature regime of visibility that assumed nature was an object amenable to representation and control. The fact that plant specimens could be more easily preserved and rendered portable than animals, in tandem with conventions of botanical representation that collapsed seasonality into a gathering of stem, leaf, flower, and seed in one frame, contributed to the assumption of plants as fully visible and knowable. The history of flowers, Phuler Itihash, also stands collapsed in this phenological and biological flattening of botanical representation. But when we singularly consider the plant specimens in Dickinson's herbarium, a new relations of production is revealed that is highly phytopolitical in nature, the massive and grand reshuffling of global biota. Coming towards the end, in order to understand Phuler Itihash fully, we need to do away with the colonial botanical practice of exercising control through arrangement in herbaria, and Dickinson's herbarium is no exception. Prudence Gibson proposes the concept of dark botany, which is a decolonial method that acknowledges past violence done to plants and indigenous peoples and incorporates improved access to botanical information and an end to indigenous erasure for better human-plant relations and better understanding of their extensive and distributed value. The first step is to tell true stories. In the context of Emily Dickinson, before there was Amherst, where Dickinson was born, there was no Nota. Dickinson was raised to believe her ancestors represented the first people of Hadley and Amherst, but before the Dickinsons, there was Chickwallop, Avansuke, Umpanchela, Kwan, and their wide extended families that have inhabited this place for thousands of years and cultivated it. When in the 1600s, Emily's ancestor Nathaniel Dickinson and a group of withdrawers sought to settle a plantation on the Connecticut River, they knew they were requesting land and no Nota. In the subsequent centuries, through trade, debt, and settler expansion and multiple wars, the settlers on which side the Dickinsons always remained made the land their own and displaced the natives, and through their own practices converted good native agricultural land into European-style meadows with European flowers, from where Dickinson collected many of her specimens. In this slide then, concluding, we need to discard settler logics and develop new relations to land by recognizing its stolen histories. Dickinson's herbaria is embedded and embrangled in the grand reshuffling of plants and humans during the colonial regime, and the best understanding is offered when we understand it as imbricated in other ecologies, particularly the phytopolitical. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raniganj. So this brings us to the end of the third technical session. Now I would like to request Dr. Biswas to give his valuable feedback.
Thank you very much for all the validation members who presented that report. So far since paper presented in this session, what I observed from all the papers that this I will take to the event and then conclude the session. The very first paper was presented by So basically, his paper was talking about the displacements of tribal power. to protect the animals and other species. So that is actually we should understand that it is present in modernization is happening. So with that, displacements of people and displacement of animals are getting very important. But what we should understand that in old days and right from ancient to the modern time, so that there was a concept of coexistence of humans and other species. So if you work in that sustainability, in that sustainability with the ecosystem, and if you synchronize with the ecosystem, then there won't be any problem. What I feel, and there are so many research also to show such type of policy can be adopted so that we can have a kind of ecosystem in that environment. And that was obviously a good paper because of that time was not about all 2 years now. Second article, so our presentation it was again very good presentation and since the world war, like so many wars and all those things like displaced many things in many ways. But as I was also discussing in the morning that your music, literature, the knowledge, the traditions that travel to that actually don't consider any boundaries and all. If you are sitting here, but you get it viewed in this place, so you will try to connect and understand because music, literature, art has no languages rather than it has a kind of reflections to which you understand. And we humans should try to understand that actually literature and music, art, so on, so that actually connects people. So that is a very simple policy that if we adapt, and today's is we can expect a very harmonious world, and that is 7,000 that can bring everybody very much closer. So that was a very nice paper. Can be developed and a very good research paper. And then Siddharth saying that these historically changing borders of its and its implications. Obviously, that Greek was in Europe. That was the first country from where cities, the concept of city states and the political states with the European literature to find it, and we are talking that you are talking about. But what happened is, as gradually time passed, the things got mixed up with each other because of religion and then cruelty, and because that human characters and human behavior is dangerous to them. And they don't bother about anything. Whereas as compared to animals, they have their own rules and regulations in general. But so-called civilizations and we the people, those who are civilized, has many rules and regulations, but we do not have much control on our animals and our growth aspirations. That actually changed the populations in the world and invasions also. And Greece obviously has no country is not new. So everything is mixed up, and because of this globalization of things, the humans also mix up, and then hybrid. And today in the 21st century, we have beta scientists, which actually evolve technology, and they don't bother about the borders, agricultures, and traditions. And actually, it is very much concerned about that. So that actually his presentation was very nice. So he had to say very other thing, but because of time, was not able to. But anyways, he presented okay, nicely. And then the fourth paper, unfortunately, silent and surveillance. That actually the paper was actually she was revolving around the adaptation. It is obviously that adaptation is the process through which we can survive anywhere in the world. So if a person is not in a position to adapt, then you will be the odd man out. So and the human is the species which they can adapt very easily anywhere in the world. Either it is India or in even in the great platform, you can survive. Humans are surviving with
so much of adaptation. So adaptation is the main policy, and human adapted it very nicely. So that was actually the idea we got around that paper. And then Sangeeta was presenting the paper. So basically, she was saying that social economic and political rights that we given to the people. Because the females are very much deprived and oppressed, and it is traditionally also they claim to be deprived and otherwise, but in the present day you see it works and husband that whether you are deprived or supply or so on so. Obviously, you will get to know the state of mind of any husband. So the young generation, those who are unmarried, they will not understand it, but sometimes maybe the female also will counsel us. There are many females, I guess, I dare to tell you, obviously, otherwise, in the morning it was not possible. But you ask us, then we will tell you the socio-economic and political conditions of human. Because आदमी पैदा तो इसीलिए हुआ है कि तीन चीज सरवाए एक तो है मांग भर जब मांग भरा तो मांग भरो ये मनी तो ये दोनों जो है आपका ये इनएविटेबल है तो जो भी है presented very nicely and all and the socio-economic and political rights were already given to them and you see शेर का सवारी जो है हमेशा दुर्गा ही करती है शेर का सवारी जो है वो दुर्गा ही करती है तो आप दुर्गा के रूप को ज्यादा सोशल इकोनॉमिक पॉलिटिकल जो है डिस्क्रिमिनेशन होगा है उसके हमें ना रहा सो एनीवेज दैट वाज द पेपर एंड दैट द लास्ट पेपर was to Bharati. She was talking about it's not only the human on the planet displays and that was another good paper that I want to read that species novels or any other topics that also travel with the human civilization from one country to other country. So that also give a kind of nature also giving and those plants and other things also surviving in certain kind of environment from where that plant and other things to move from other places. So the environment also saying and nature also you giving the signal that there is possibility of coexistence. The code if you follow that course, then definitely we can have a very peaceful nation and like Bhutan we can talk about the gross national happiness. So anyway, that was a very nice presentation of more or less it was rather political, it was very philosophical and there were so many metaphoric expressions also with you. जैसे हम लोग कहते हैं कि अगर दिन तो गया there is a metaphoric expression. So in that one must understand that how much the person is undergoing the pain. So metaphoric that is something that will give you more will generate more connection, love, affection, and many other things. So I will conclude by saying that अगर व्यापार चाहते हो और अगर व्यापार बिजनेस व्यापार चाहते हो तो व्यापार हो सकता है अगर बिकना चाहती हो तो खरीदार भी मिल सकता है बिकना चाहती हो तो खरीदार मिल सकता है तो अपने यार को दुश्मन ना समझ तो अपने दुश्मन को शक के निगाहों से मत देखा जाए तो अपने दुश्मन को सबके निगाहों से मत देखा जाए तो तेरे अपने यार की तेरा काफी हो सकता है तो दुनिया अभी जो है world is like that. Don't think that with whom you feel so safe. कि बहुत सारे मीडिया हमारी देश में है तो कि गए तो प्यार से लेकिन लौट के आए तो So thank you very much for giving this opportunity and wonderful sessions. So thank you very much. And that is Salvi. You did a very wonderful job and you did recognize that the students when they are very awesome. So one must recognize them and then they will come to this side. So because it's our duty to bring them from other side to this side. Thank you very much to you. So
thank you, sir. That was very insightful.
our final session, not only of this day, but this two-day international conference. And to chair this final session, I would like to welcome first Professor Soumitra Rai, Associate Professor, Department of English, Raniganj Maharashtra, and Secretary of Bhalotia, Charcha, Kendra. Along with him, this session will be co-chaired by Mr. Bharata, Department of History, Trivenidevi College, and EC member of Bhalotia, Charcha.
Before we begin this session, as a chairperson, it is my duty to remind all the participants that we should stick to the time frame, 5 minutes, and at the end of it, we will give you a reminder. Kindly keep your ears on to get the reminder, then we will come to the next 2 minutes. Okay, thank you.
We'll start this session with the presentation by Dr. Bhalotia. Ma'am, if you're
Yes, am I audible?
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Respected Chairperson, sir, my fellow presenters, and everybody present here, a very good afternoon to all of you. A theoretical take that I would try to present briefly today has been titled Challenging the Shadow Lines, the Hermeneutics of Liquid Geography in Bashobi Phrases from the Ganga to the Te. Now you see, the earth has its own natural border, which is not decided by man. Natural borders are pre-given and does not constitute any proposition of ownership. But with the evolution of the idea of property in human society, this attribute of the natural order of land is denaturalized, ushering in the issue of landedness. Now, the episteme of landedness restricts the natural instinct to nomadify. It brings in the question of affiliation, belongingness, bordered imagination, and aspects related to issues of propertyhood. This locational fixity makes land vulnerable to be easily arrested, marked, inscribed by human interventions. Now, opposed to this is the immanent desire to globalize, to fraternize with other beings, an immanence which is counterpoised by the forces of state formation, nationalist ideologies, and ethnic identities. In that way, the trans-territorial, the globism, is innate to man. This desire to expand and transorient have been made possible throughout the ages by the mobile vector of the imaginative flourish. The logic of transverse resonates with the liquidity of a river, which too heaves out, whose tidal particles celebrate every corner of the globe. The river is a globism forever. The desire to transcend and to flow exhibits a longing to converse with the other, which is actually the inherent human aspiration to establish connections with the world. Now, as an author who has experienced the diversity of a changing worlds of India and Scotland, Bashobi Fraser distinctly articulates this link between her two countries. As in some of our other poems, this kernel of human consciousness, which is desirous of a flow unshackled and unbridled, is captured in his quasi-epical poem, From the Ganga to the Te. Through the imaginary conversation between the two main rivers that represent not only two countries but two civilizations, two continents, Fraser challenges the static closure of the denaturalized world. The physical rivers in the poem actually replicate the river inside all of us, which yearns to flow, to rhizomize. This long poem thus creates a new possibility to challenge the existing pedagogies of nation and national fixity. Now, rivers have strongly influenced our communities and the formation of early settlements, and from the beginning of civilization have exercised an effulgence of positive energy. The conversation between the Ganga and the Te, both mythological and real, reveals an almost timeless relationship between the rivers. The difference between the two rivers is stark. The alluvium of the Ganga and the fiercely terrain of the Te bonds together in their character of mobility. Both Ganga and the Te are therefore true Muktodharas. The conversation between these free flowing rivers offer a nuanced picture of the cross national and trans civilizational fusion and friction that help understand a world in which cultural boundaries are permeable. The two rivers talk of an age old saga common to the imagination of man. The origin of the Te, as Bashobi narrates, is in the Nordic caves, and the Ganga emerges from the frozen fetal of the Gangotri. Yet both have welcomed settlements along their banks and have played their part in human civilization. The association of the colonial encounter between the two countries had established a connection between the two rivers. This once again demonstrates the immense role of liquid geography to fashion our collective ontology of interconnectedness. The lands that were naturally offered up to form settlements were subsequently inscribed with the imprint of sovereign control. This became even more ruthless in the years of imperialistic regime, where Ganga is saying, "But men too can force nature. My sheer paddy green was torn away, and in its place was sown a low caste seed." Both Ganga and the Te militate against the static regime of modernity, transcending the anchorage of static closures. Tortured by the reminiscent of the partition after Indian independence, the bracketed existence where land was owned up and controlled. Yes. Okay, I'll conclude. The Ganga is saying the truncated entity in the identity of two nations which cut up their land and their people, but I emphasize, could not succeed in ripping my waters or carving boundaries on my fluid freedom. This is the victory of the transversal flow that symbolize our liberation from the encircled regimentation and fixed identities. But in present times, new wars of landedness creep in. The corporate sponsored heavy trawling of the salmon in the Te and the hillside in the Ganga, the excessive pollution, or the more violent divisions of a weapon building world of political suspicion envelop, I quote, now in a climate of nurtured hate and anticipated enmity. Therefore, the poem, I conclude, explores the road of the riverine sensibility that urges us to transcend from a particular geographical identity of a citizen to the trans-territorial of the globism, which is innate to man. The Ganga and the Te flows with that certainty of continuity to let, I quote from the poem, water's sacred truth seep into human consciousness as the source of life. This sacred truth of mobility and fluidity can disseminate rhythms of harmony in this divided world. Thank you so much. I hope I am on time.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next presentation is actually a joint presentation by Sefali Gurunare and Dr. Bhalotia, titled Reimagining Borders.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shifali Zungare, and I am a research scholar at Visvesvaraya National Institute of Technology, Nagpur, in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. Thank you for accepting my abstract and giving me the opportunity to present my work. I'll be presenting my paper titled Reimagining Borders as Custodians of Defined Geographies, a case study of Pahalgam attack. I'll be presenting on the behalf of my co-author and guide, Dr. Bibhudatta Dash. This presentation will navigate you through the various dimensions of cross-border terrorism, the limitations of immigration and customs control, the necessity of well-defined boundaries for global peace, and how borders, rather than being sites of conflict, can become incubators of harmony. On April 22nd in Pahalgam, a terror attack claimed the lives of 26 innocent civilians. This incident not only shook Jammu and Kashmir but also the whole of India. It forces us to reconsider the way we understand national borders, not just as physical lines but as ideological frontiers. Today, our borders are not only physical spaces, they are psychological and ideological battlegrounds. The Pahalgam attack is not just an act of terror, it's a wake up call. The attack reinforced the urgent need to bolster our counter terrorism infrastructure and eliminate security loopholes in sensitive zones. The deliberate focus of the terrorists on the non combatants underscores that the aim was to destabilize social equilibrium and state authority. Historically, borders have functioned as administrative thresholds, governing the movement of people, regulating goods, and affirming sovereign legality. The border must be understood not merely as a line of control but as a civilizational interface where the clash of values, narratives, and identities take place. To protect sovereignty in the 21st century is to defend not just territory but also the ideological architecture of the nation state, and that begins at the border. Cross border terrorism weaponizes border regions, turning them into perpetual conflict zones. This not only distorts the lived reality of local populations but corrodes public faith in the state's ability to maintain order. Cross border terrorism targets the soul of the nation. To respond is not simply to secure territory, but to protect institutional integrity, civic trust, and civilizational ethos. Throughout modern history, territorial ambiguity has been a frequent catalyst for conflict. From Kashmir to the South China Sea, unclear boundaries provide fertile ground for escalation and proxy aggression. Borders are not antithetical to peace, they are its precondition. The future of borders lies in hybrid design where sensors and satellites meet sociology and soft power. The border is not a wall, it is a commitment to protect, to respect, and to cooperate under restraint. The future of border security is not a thicker wall but a smarter interface. AI driven infrastructure allows the state to project strategic depth without deploying overwhelming force. Hence, I would like to conclude that in an era of global trade, migration, and digital connectivity, the open border absolutism and xenophobic closure is not the answer, but the managed interdependence is. Law begins with geography. Without defined boundaries, rights remain abstract. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next presenter will be Professor Sonalita Shur. She will be presenting a paper titled The Politics of Belonging.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sonalita Shur. I am an assistant professor at the Department of Political Science, Raniganj Mahavidyalaya. So the paper I am presenting today is entitled Politics of Belonging, Citizenship, Borders and Global Inequality. Through my presentation today, I will try to explore how citizenship and border regimes, which are often assumed to be neutral tools of governance, has become deeply politicized, unequal, and increasingly exclusionary. In an increasingly globalized world, the idea of belonging, that is, who belong and who does not, is being actively reshaped by restrictive border policies and hierarchical citizenship regimes. Despite globalization's promise of interconnectedness and mobility, the benefits are the benefit. the benefits are unequally divided. As for some, borders are increasingly porous, while for others, they are hardening with unprecedented rigidity. These mechanisms, I argue, have in fact become central to the creation and maintenance of global inequality. Citizenship, which was once framed as a universal entitlement within the liberal democratic tradition, is now increasingly seen as a mechanism of inclusion and exclusion. Citizenship, which is actually inherited by an individual at birth, either by jus soli, that is the right of soil, or jus sanguinis, that is the right of blood, carries along with it a set of numerous other rights, opportunities, and privileges that we see are unequal across the globe today. The global passport hierarchy, in fact, provides one of the most visible and quantifiable manifestations of citizenship-based inequality. Passport ranking system measures the number of countries a passport holder can visit without requiring a prior visa, reflecting the relative power and privileges conferred by different nationalities. These hierarchies correlate strongly with global economic and political power, with wealthy Western nations typically dominating the top positions, while countries from the global south occupy the lower strata. This arrangement effectively creates a global mobility divide that systematically privileges citizens from developed countries while restricting the movement of those from the developing ones. Within this hierarchy, the South Asian passports occupy relatively lower positions. As of 2024 data, India's passport ranks approximately 85th globally, allowing visa-free or visa-on-arrival access to roughly 60 countries, which is significantly fewer than the 180 plus destinations that can be accessed through Japanese, Korean, or European passport holders. Pakistan's passport consistently marks among the five most mobility restricted passports globally, while Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka occupy comparable position to India. These rankings reflect the geopolitical position of South Asian nations and manifest a concrete restrictions on the mobility, opportunities, and experiences available to South Asian citizens in the global arena. India's citizenship regimes, in fact, offers a particularly rich case study of the politics of belonging in the contemporary world. The country's approach to citizenship has evolved significantly since independence, moving from a relatively inclusive jus soli framework towards an increasingly ethnic and religious conception of citizenship that privileges certain identities over others. The recent development, particularly the CAA and the proposed NRC, have intensified contestations over who legitimately belong within the Indian political community. In Sri Lanka, the post-war Sinhala Buddhist nationalism had led to exclusionary politics against Tamil and Muslim minorities. In Myanmar, the Rohingyas were rendered stateless through the 1982 citizenship law, culminating in ethnic cleansing and mass displacement in 2017. These examples underscore how citizenship in South Asia is not merely legal states but a battleground of identity and power. The idea that citizenship should be universal and equal is increasingly under strain. Today, one's place of birth, ethnicity, or religion can determine whether they are granted rights or denied them or are forced to live in limbo. Hannah Arendt's insight that the law of citizenship equates to the rights to have rights remains as pertinent as ever. Thus, while the development of citizenship has generally been regarded as a movement from unequal to equal membership in the political community, but the conditions of global politics have disturbed such movements to the extent that citizenship norms are becoming more divergent today. Like citizenship, border restrictions are among the most visible and consequential tool for reinforcing the politics of belonging. They determine not only who may enter or leave a country, but also under what conditions and with what rights. For most people, especially from the global south, borders are formidable barriers enforced through strict visa requirements, surveillance, and exclusionary practices. These restrictions are justified by states as necessary for security, economic protection, or cultural cohesion, but in practice, they often reinforce global hierarchies and inequalities. For example, Indian passport holders face significant hurdles in obtaining visas for travel to the US, EU, and many other regions, often requiring extensive documentation, interviews, and long wait times. Globally, there is pronounced visa code divide where citizens of the developing countries face higher financial and bureaucratic barriers to travel than from those from the developed nations. This creates a world where freedom of movement is effectively a privilege of birth and nationality. While borders are tightly controlled for some, the rise of golden visa and citizenship by investment programs exposes a stark paradox. As for the ultra wealthy, borders become porous and citizenship is commodified. Countries such as the US, Greece, Portugal, Spain, and several Caribbean nations offers residency or citizenship in exchange for substantial investment, often ranging from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. For instance, the US EB-5 program allows foreign nationals to obtain green cards by investing a hefty amount. This system illustrates global inequality while ordinary Indians or others from the global south face daunting barriers to mobility. The wealthy can effectively buy their way into countries with stronger passports and greater mobilities. Scholars like Rick Jones have documented how the global border regimes operate not to prevent all movement, but to regulate and stratify it. Borders today are not just lines on map, they are active sorting machines that determine who is welcome and who is not. Beyond physical borders, we now see the emergence of digital borders as well. The biometric databases like India's Aadhaar, while enabling service delivery, are also used to surveil, exclude, and target population. Refugee biometric registration systems used by the UNHCR are seen to be weaponized by host or home states. Thus,
Shunodita, please conclude. You have already overshot time. We cannot give you any more time. Please conclude. Yes. Shunodita, can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Yes, sir.
And please conclude. We have already overshot time. Please conclude.
Okay. Did I got unmuted?
Yes, you are unmuted. Please conclude.
Okay, I have already concluded. I was not audible, I believe. Was I audible?
We lost you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Alright, so our next presenter is Shreya Mishra. She will be presenting a paper titled Intersecting Identities. Just a gentle reminder, please keep a track of the time. Okay, it's 7 minutes.
A hearty good afternoon to everybody present here. Hope I'm audible. Am I audible, sir?
Yes,
Okay. So today I'll be presenting a paper titled Intersecting Identities, a discourse analysis of gender and border dynamics. Now, firstly, I'll provide a brief outline of what I'm going to present today. Borders are fraught with gendered complexities, underscoring their sensitive nature. The convergence of borders and gender yields intricately layered and sensitive issues. Now, this paper of mine aims to explore the aforementioned interconnectedness between these two. Now, first of all, let us understand the different nuances of gender in the context of migration. As the anthropologist Marcel Lagarde points out, gender is more than a category. It is a broad theory that encompasses theories, hypotheses, interpretations, and knowledge related to the set of historical phenomena built around sex. The feminist approach to gender precisely questions critically that the feminine and the masculine are natural facts and that they have become the basis of political and social inequality between men and women. Regarding migration, gender is a social relationship that informs the mobility of women and makes it especially difficult due to the lack of economic resources, the assigned care responsibilities, and or the restrictions on movement which is implicit in the order of gender as well as the permanent threat and the fear of violence during migration, which in the case of women has particular expressions and experiences. Cases have been documented in which, when traveling as a couple, the harshness of the departure and the painful conditions surrounding it can increase the already existing gender-based violence in the couple at the hands of the husbands. Women, as migrant subjects, cross the gender border in the same way that symbolically constructs them as immobile, and in doing so, they transgress the positions assigned by the generic order, disobey and act with autonomy, and thereby paying a price for it. Now, the sudden vulnerability of migrant women is the result of a painful, dangerous, and precarious condition in which migration takes place, which legitimizes the role of man as protectors and companions of women. This is not a minor issue because it legitimizes the idea that women should be watched, accompanied, and protected during migration by their male relatives or by their circumstantial partners who protect them from other men. Well, within the margin of action of migrant women, several examples of strategies carried out by them can be found. For example, they seek protection of a man, cross-dress as a man, settle in a place on the road for a while, follow safer routes or travel in groups. In this framework of gender relations in mobility, we find there's a clear tension between the activation and deactivation of sexual difference from the body of women. In this way, the sexual contract is ensured and reproduced at the border. Men are guaranteed sexual access to women's bodies and also ensured additional attention care such as clothes washing or food preparation, naturalized activities is typical of women. In these cases, it is clear that in this contract, the women pay a reproductive tax, a higher price than their male migrant partners. Now, coming to another very pertinent issue, that is the very concept of nationalism and nation has always been considered to be a male bastion. Neera Yuval Davis in Gender and Nation highlights how both primordial and constructivist theories of nation have largely ignored the gender relations. As discussion of the nations has been centered within the public sphere, women have always been relegated to the private sphere. The establishment of a nation state in turn created borders and boundaries separating insiders from the other, which for a long time included women. Now, where women were included in the discussion of borders and nations, they have been assigned the role of a mother of the nation. Sorry, sir?
2 minutes more, please conclude. 2 minutes more for your presentation. Got a couple of minutes left.
Okay, conclude. Okay, I understand. Okay, so migration, it has posed a double-edged challenge to feminist and gender-sensitive analysis to the border studies. The issue of migrant women in domestic service both confirms and challenges this gender contract thesis. Migrant women are then fixed between the two dominant boundaries of public and private, which creates a conflict of identity between the traditionally assigned gender roles and the newly created modern identities and establishment of a new global migration space. Now, keeping in mind the time constraint, I will quickly go through some of the measures that can be implemented to support a gender-sensitive border management. That is, engendering borders is a need of hour, which means to be sensitive to the issue of gender when analyzing practices and ideas that constitute the study of borders. Gender-sensitive objectives should display measurable and viable goals designed specifically to integrate gender equality and close an identified gender gap. To remove barriers and biases against women's participation, conditions of service should include like flexible working hours, standardized routes, specific safety concerns for women, and provision of uniform design approved by women. Thank you. I hope I've concluded on time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presentation will be by Shri Kumar Mangal, and the presentation is titled Partition Communities.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Oh, thank you. So today I will be presenting my paper on partitioned communities and cross-border identities, the case of India's partition. This article of mine revisits the partition of Eastern India, emphasizing that it remains an active and unresolved historical experience. Unlike Punjab, which saw immediate large-scale violence, Bengal experienced prolonged and shifting refugee flows that reshaped its socio-political landscape. Yet, government focus remained largely on Punjab. Nehru, for instance, barely acknowledged East Bengal refugees, revealing a broader indifference and a regime of silence that suppressed public discourse around the region's trauma. Drawing the border. The task of demarcating the border fell on Radcliffe, a British civil servant unfamiliar with India who was given only 6 weeks' time. The Bengal Boundary Commission ambiguous directive to divide land based on contagious majority religious populations and other factors invited manipulation. The Muslim League demanded more than just Muslim majority districts, arguing for a partition based on subdivisions rather than rather than smaller thanas, and claiming regions like Chittagong Hill Tracts and Darjeeling to economically support East Bengal. They also insisted Calcutta to be included for its jute economic linkages. The Congress, on the other hand, demanded maximum territory, proposing a compact state with 70% Hindu majority. It also claimed Murshidabad and Sundarban, citing logistical, democratic, and economic arguments. Local groups also petitioned the commission with census data and cultural claims. Hindus in areas like Gaurnandi and Vikrampur emphasized their majority role and cultural significance. Some Muslim groups, in contrast, defended their stakes in Calcutta, highlighting their historical contributions. The border bisected villages, homes, and markets, disrupting lives and livelihood. In many cases, traditional social systems, economic connections, and access to essential services were destroyed. Enclaves known as cheat mahals further complicated the matters, creating a feudal gambling among princely states. These land pockets left thousands effectively stateless, as neither country integrated them fully. Radcliffe prioritized infrastructure over human geography, leading to deep dissatisfaction. Securing the border. The artificially drawn Indo-Bangladesh border, cutting across homes and farmlands, became a volatile space. Natural cattle movement and seasonal migration of Muslim laborers to Indian tea gardens became a cause of concern. Accusations of deliberate democratic manipulation led to increased surveillance and communal suspicion. Borders, theoretically meant to minimally disrupt lives, quickly became a site of policing. Transit trade was initially allowed, but the expiry of standstill agreement in February 1948 led to customs enforcement. This especially harmed traders of perishable goods such as fish merchants who could not navigate bureaucratic delays in time. Militias and bureaucracies disrupted local economies. Smuggling became a survival tactic. Rice, kerosene, sugar went from India to East Pakistan. Jute and betel nuts moved in rivers. Government launched anti-smuggling operations. India backed semi-military volunteer corps while Pakistan formed Ansar Bahini. But these forces often worsened communal tensions, further triggering migration. Tackling the migrants. Initially, both governments believed refugee movement was temporary, but the 1950 massacre and the 1952 language riots in Dhaka triggered mass migration. Hindus from East Bengal to India and Muslims from India to East Pakistan. The introduction of a passport and visa system in October 1952 formalized the border. Pakistan Category A visa allowed cross-border laborers, while India similarly restricted movement. The Indian passport policy denied citizenship to anyone who migrated to Pakistan after March 1, 1947. These policies forced individuals to declare national loyalties, often splitting families and trapping others in legal limbo. The system also brought practical dilemmas. Many Muslim officials who had opted for jobs in Pakistan applied for Indian passports to safeguard their Indian properties. Meanwhile, many Hindus in East Pakistan applied for Indian passports, fearing restrictions in future movement. Despite a migration certificate policy introduced later by India to ease restrictions, only those under direct threat could use it. Over time, pressure on poor and middle-class Hindus, land loss, businesses closures, and threats forced many to migrate illegally. This persistent flow revealed the state's limited control over its boundaries. Minorities' violence and the nation. Partition explores the crucial, often unacknowledged role of religion in forming national identities. Though the modern state claimed secularism, policies and attitudes often conflated religion with nationality. Tista Das challenges, excuse me,
Minutes left, please. So conclude. Okay, you got 2 minutes left.
hello?
You got 2 minutes left to conclude. So kindly conclude
Okay,
the
okay,
paper.
sure. I am concluding my stance. I'm concluding with minorities' violence and the nation. Partition exposed the crucial, often unacknowledged role of religion in forming national identities. Though the modern state claimed secularism, policies and attitudes often conflated religion with nationality. Tista Das challenges the belief that Bengal's partition was peaceful compared to Punjab. She argues that violence in Bengal may have slower and more dispersed, but it was no less real. Fear of abduction, dishonor, or death was itself a form of violence. Incidents like 1946 Noakhali riots created deep rooted insecurity among Hindus. Refugees often saw violation of religion, culture, and honor, especially involving women, as more traumatic than physical violence. Indian newspaper portrayed routine oppression in East Pakistan, reinforcing the perception that violence has been normalized and justifying continued migration. Threatening letters and posters branded Hindus as traitors. Even before the 1950 riots, elite Hindus in East Bengal faced intimidation. In 1950, Khulna Barisal riots began as peasant uprising but soon spread across borders, triggering mirrored violence. In West Bengal, Muslim neighborhoods in Calcutta faced riots, and reports of empty trains evoked memories of Punjab's carnage. Public opinion in both countries hardened, pushing the population exchange and permanent rehabilitation. Thank you.
Thank you. For the final presentation of today and this international conference, we have a joint paper presentation, and it is an international presentation from Bangladesh. Paper will be presented by Bhalotia and Samira Tasneem, titled Emotional Impact on Indigenous Students.
Hello everyone, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Let me share my screen first. Can you see my screen?
No, we cannot see your presentation. If it is possible, we can present without. Okay, yeah, we can see your screen now.
Hello everyone, I am Samira Tasneem. I am a student at Department of English, Jahangirnagar University, and I am presenting a presentation on emotional impact on indigenous students in educational systems, a border within border. Now let's have a look at the research outline. At first we will have some introductory discussions, then we will discuss research context and questions, and then we will discuss about methodology, key findings, challenges, and finally recommendations to reform. At first, let's have a look at a case scenario from Canada. In Canada, Indigenous children were being demeaned in the schools, and their culture and language were being taken away from them, and they were being told that they were inferior, pagans, and they were savages and unworthy of being respected. This is the way they were made feel that they were isolated from the mainstream pedagogy and as well as the society. The presentation focuses on the emotional challenges faced by Indigenous students in educational systems. Earlier, I dropped a term that border within a border. What does this actually mean? This metaphor captures the compounded barriers, that is, systematic, cultural, and emotional, that indigenous students encounter in academic setting. Drawing from a qualitative study at Jahangirnagar University and insights from literature review, I'll explore how systematic marginalization impacts indigenous students' emotional well-being and academic success, and how it proposes culturally responsive solutions. Now, let's move into the research context and questions. The study investigates a critical gap: how systematic marginalization shapes the emotional experiences of indigenous students. They carry their historical traumas, or it can be said as intergenerational trauma, that the oppression their ancestors faced, and it is combined with current systematic biases that creates extreme emotional distress towards them. Our research question asks, how does systematic marginalization influence indigenous students' emotional well-being and academic success? This question is vital because lower success rates among indigenous students reflect systematic issues that demand reform. Now let's move about the methodology. To answer this, we conducted a qualitative study at Jahangirnagar University, engaging indigenous students through in-depth interviews. We also held focus groups with community members to gain broader cultural perspectives. This approach allowed us to capture emotional experience, aligning with the culturally sensitive methods. Our sample included students from diverse indigenous groups, ensuring varied perspectives. The data revealed patterns of emotional distress tied to systematic and cultural barriers, which I'll discuss next. Now let's look into some key findings. The first one is emotional challenges. Our findings reveals that most participants experience anxiety, isolation, and cultural disconnection. For instance, students reported feeling
Yeah,
alone.
Samira, you have got 2 minutes to conclude, okay? Please conclude your paper. Got 2 minutes more. Okay. Which is the chest story?
Sorry?
Which is the chest story? Got 2 minutes left. Please conclude. Okay?
Uh, okay. Due to lack of cultural representation in curricula, echoing Armstrong observation that inaccurate or absent indigenous content. Another one is they often experience social isolation due to factors such as geographical separation and cultural differences. Faculty who are flexible and shifted away from Eurocentric educational culture and pedagogies while demonstrating sensitivity to the unique issues that indigenous students faced had a positive impact. Now I am inviting my co-presenter Shurav Jibril to conclude the rest.
Can you see the screen? Can anyone show that you are seeing the screen?
So we're going to please begin and conclude the paper. We are waiting for the conclusion. We are waiting for the conclusion. Chest story.
Sharing a screen. I don't know if.
Last slide is done. Finally, chest story.
Okay. Okay. So talking about some challenges. Here, the linguistic challenge is the first one that is faced by indigenous students. Often the indigenous students have their own language that I have termed as L0, and they are often in the classroom with L1, that is the Bangla in Bangladesh, and often in L2, that is English in Bangladeshi context. So there is a shift, there is a migration, there is a border always from their language to language. They have to translate their own language towards the L1 and then to L2. It can be seen like this, something like this, L0 to L1 and then L2. And these indigenous languages sometimes lack a written formal form or any form of grammatical rules or something. So it is difficult for them to incorporate their language with L1 or L2. There are also social cultural barriers. They are often marginalized. They are often marginalized in classroom, and the mainstream educational system does not include anything for them to offer. And due to this, they can lose their motivation, and they are often provided with less resources, and they're often feared of embarrassment or failure. They cannot participate in general cultural contextual programs or anything. So English language curriculum is very difficult for them. So talking about this, we can go for three recommendations. The first one is culturally responsive curricula. That is, we can include their histories, their language, their cultural things into our curriculum system, our curricula. We can also go for some mental health support that can help them to regain what they have lost or regain their fear of learning something new. And the third one is community engagement. Okay, I'm concluding. Thank you. And we can go for community engagement as well. Supportive staff can also go for a good result. And that is it. Let us commit to create an inclusive educational system that honors indigenous identities. Thank you, everyone, for being a nice listener.
Thank you so much.
With our final presentation being done, I will now request the chair to continue the session and we can move towards ending the program.
Okay, so we had a variety of papers belonging to various parts of the globe, and all the papers have been very enriching. So many congratulations to the presenters for such wonderful presentations. Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll now swiftly shift that other hat of the anchor now. We shift to the final part of the 2-day international conference on borderlines, redefining political landscapes in the developing world, and we come to the valedictory session. So for this session, our request Mr. Mukherjee, is in charge of Trivenidevi Bhalotia College, to kindly come over and share his thoughts on the duties.
Thank you everyone for being part of the college and Burdwan Charcha Kendra. আমার জিনিস আগে মনে হচ্ছে যে ব্যাক এইড অফ দ্য সার্ভিস লাইফ আমি একটা ভালো কাজ করলাম, এটা হচ্ছে আমরা এই হাতটা ধরলাম, আমি চাইবো আমি হয়তো আর 3 মাস পরে চলে যাবো, কারণ মেডিকেল সায়েন্স আমার রিটায়ার করবো, কিন্তু এই হাত যেন ডিগ্রি কলেজ এবং ভারত বিদ্যা চর্চা কেন্দ্র যেন করে থাকে। এরপরে আজকে বা কালকে 2 দিন ধরে যত পেপারস প্রেজেন্টেশন হয়েছে এখানে, আজকে আমি কিছুই শুনতে পাইনি। 1 বছর পরে যখন এটা প্রিন্ট আকারে বেরোবে, আমি সৌমিত্রকে রিকোয়েস্ট করে যাচ্ছি আমাকে একটা কপি যেন পাঠায়, যখন আমি পড়ে যাই তখন আমার কাছে অপরন্ত সময় থাকবে পড়বার মতো। আমি এখনই আমার সমস্ত বইপত্র কিনে রেখে দিই, আমি এটা পড়বো বয়সের পরে, যখন আর আমার কিছু পড়বো না, আমি কিছু করতে চাই না। তবে আমাকে বিরোধ ইচ্ছে আমি পড়বো, সেটা হচ্ছে কোন একটা এনজিওর সাথে জয়েন করে হয়তো আমি ওই স্ট্রিট চাইল্ডের পড়াশোনার মধ্যে কিছু সাহায্য করবো, বা যেখানে একদম আমাদের ভাষায় যারা বিলো দ্য পভার্টি লাইন যারা পড়ে আছে তাদের জন্য কিছু করার জন্য। আর আমি এইসব বিষয়ের মধ্যে পড়তাম। যাই হোক, পিডিবি কলেজ আজকে খুবই গর্বিত, উই আর ভেরি প্রাউড যে আমরা আমাদের ইংলিশ এবং পলিটিক্যাল সায়েন্স ডিপার্টমেন্টের সাথে ভারত বিদ্যা চর্চা কেন্দ্র যেরকম একটা ইন্টারন্যাশনাল সেমিনার করলো তার জন্য আমরাও উঠলাম কিছুটা সেমিনার বা পৃথিবীর অন্যান্য প্রান্তে কি ঘটছে সেই ইনফরমেশন শুধু যদি আমাদের কাছে এইসবের মারফত না আসে তাহলে আমরাই বা কিভাবে কাজ করবো বা আমাদের ছাত্রছাত্রীদেরই বা কিভাবে কাজ করাবো। কারণ এখন এই যে ডিগ্রি সিলেবাস চলছে তাতে একটা রিসার্চ একটা বড় আকার নিয়ে ফেলেছে এবং রিসার্চ করতে গেলে বিদেশের সাথে যোগাযোগটা মানে অন্যান্য লোকেরা কিভাবে ভাবছে জিনিসটাকে সেটা দেখাটা খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট হয়েছে। যাই হোক, once again I thank from the core of my heart on behalf of Redefining College বর্তমান ভারত শিক্ষা চর্চা কেন্দ্র যে তারা আমাদের সাথে আজকে পার্ট হয়েছে। I thank all of you, especially my departmental English and political science departmental colleagues যারা দিনরাত পরিশ্রম করে এই সমস্ত জিনিসটাকে একটা ভালো রূপ ভালো আকার দিতে পেরেছে। কালকে আমাদের একটু অসুবিধা হয়ে গেছিল ইলেকট্রিসিটি প্রবলেমের জন্য, আজকে ফর্চুনেটলি আমাদের কোনো অসুবিধা হয়নি। আবার হবে, আমরা আবার করবো, এই অঙ্গীকার নিয়ে আজকে আমি শেষ করছি।
Thank you so much, Professor Kendra. May I now please request Professor Ashish Barai, the joint convener of this international seminar, because we don't have the presence of a convener, Dr. Sharmani Kurji, who is away on tour. So Ashish, please make the closing remarks regarding the international conference, and then we will shift the thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, I don't know what to say. Definitely, we are now moving the last session to our two-day seminar. First of all, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to all the distinguished speakers, participants, paper presenters, and students for making this event so effective and successful. As a joint convener of this seminar, I would say that without the support of Congress, the professor of English, the theme of this seminar would not be possible. Actually, concept law that was designed by Professor. So I would like to thank you. Now, I would like to thank all the organizers. Without their support and effort, this event cannot make success. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ashish Barai. So, when we start something, there are plenty of thoughts that are in our mind, plenty of concerns that they are in our mind. But as we move forward, we find that the way we are doing things easily don't pan out that way. So about a month and a half or 2 months ago, when we started tracing down the international conference, and this was done with the perspective of, on behalf of Trivenidevi College, to make the memorandum of understanding that we had signed with Bhalotia Charcha and make the what we call the MOU workable. So there are obviously quite a few challenges, and from my experience, and I've been here for a very long time, circles and academic circles, and I know that in such cases, challenges are bound to come. There will be situations where we think that things won't work out at all. As collaborators of both ends, there were times when we felt that perhaps we would not make it in that way. But over the last 2 days, despite technical glitches, despite other things which were beyond our control, I believe as one of the secretaries of this international conference that we have put up a very, very decent show. And for that, I must first of all extend my gratitude to Professor Kendra. There have been situations where we have been lost, but Elon, as I call him, has always said that will make it happen. Thank you, Dada, for making this happen. Because I know that when you sit in a chair, when you are in a position of power and decisiveness, there are moments when it's very difficult to take certain decisions. We appreciate that. I know that as secretary of the collaborating agency, I know how difficult it is to sit on a throne and find the thoughts on the throne. So thank you so much, Yanda, for making whatever has been in your hands possible. On behalf, I extend my gratitude to the keynote speaker, Professor Bhalotia, to Dr. Shadul Kumar Bhattacharya, to Dr. Vishwash, to Dr. Tista Das, to Dr. Deva Shah, our international speaker, for their wonderful, enriching presentations. Listening to you all is an experience. It's not that always we understand everything that you speak out, because perhaps our knowledge base is a little short. That is not your problem, that is our problem. At times we struggle to gather things. I thank the board of the heart, each of the 37 presenters who read out the papers in the last 2 days. And I would fail in my duty if I did not thank one special person on my behalf, as not as secretary, not as one of the organizing secretaries, but as a friend. Thank you, Ajay Shubham, for being there over the last 2 days. We have been together for 33 years, and he sticks by my side. Thank you so much. To my colleagues, I will call them colleagues who have made this possible. Ashish, then Jayanto, Dipasri, Dogupani, Pankaj, and the departmental colleagues, and two very young enterprising people, Shobhi and Shani. Your commitment has been very good. Thank you so much for sitting here till all hours and coming very early. I think that there are plenty of backroom people who are involved day and night, providing food, extending tea, making us comfortable at IQAC, keeping the rooms clean. As one of the organizing secretaries, I thank you very much. Student volunteers, big thanks to you because you've been running around and you made us be very proud. Thank you so much. And to the two departments, Department of Political Science and Department of English, for getting the room full for most of the time. During the summer month, it's very difficult having students around. So thank you so much, dear colleagues, for this. There have been, as I have said, that we are committed to making this thing happen, to make the home happen. So we will work together in the future, definitely. And a small token of appreciation, I wish to hand over the portrait of Professor Bhashkar Chakravarti to Professor Raniganj. This is a token of appreciation on part of Charcha, Kendra, that we are handing the portrait of Professor Bhashkar Chakravarti, who has been the founder of BVCK, and incidentally who taught at this college from 1961 to 1964. I think this portrait will find a place of pride, if nowhere else, then at least in the Department of History. So it is my duty, I think, to give this portrait of sir to Vidya. I think you're very happy about it. So with the promise to do something more, we name this Charcha. Thank you so much.